Al Pacino saw the note on Jimmy's desk. He asked to read it, and what he read destroyed him. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. Tuesday night. The band was hot, the audience was pumped, and one of the greatest actors in cinema history was sitting in the guest chair. Al Pacino. The Godfather. Scarface. Scent of a Woman. 84 years old and still commanding every room he entered. He'd done 1,000 interviews over 6 decades, sat across from every talk show host imaginable, told the same stories about De Niro and Coppola and method acting until they'd become well-worn grooves in his memory. This was supposed to be another one of those nights. Promote the new film. Tell a funny anecdote. Maybe do an impression. Give the audience what they expected. Jimmy was in his element. The interview had been flowing beautifully for 12 minutes. Al was relaxed, telling a story about working with Marlon Brando that had the audience laughing. Jimmy was doing what he did best, listening, reacting, keeping the energy up. On Jimmy's desk sat his blue cue cards with prepared questions. A coffee mug. A pen. And tucked between 2 cards, partially visible, a small piece of paper. Handwritten. Folded once. It wasn't supposed to be there. It had been placed there during the commercial break by a production assistant with specific instructions. Don't mention this on air. Jimmy will know what it is. Jimmy had glanced at it briefly when he sat back down, recognized the handwriting, and felt his chest tighten. But the show was live. Al Pacino was mid-story. There was no time to process. He'd planned to deal with it after the show. But Al Pacino noticed it. Right in the middle of answering Jimmy's question about his favorite Godfather scene, Al's eyes drifted down to the desk. To that small folded note sitting between the cue cards. Something about it caught his attention. Maybe the handwriting visible on the exposed edge. Maybe just the way it was positioned, clearly not part of the show materials. Al stopped mid-sentence. His famous voice, that instrument that had delivered some of cinema's most iconic lines, just stopped. Jimmy, Al said quietly, pointing at the note. What's that? Jimmy's face changed instantly. The host's smile vanished. Oh, it's nothing. Just something that. Can I see it? The studio went quiet. 300 audience members sensing a shift in energy. The band members looking at each other uncertainly. The cameras staying locked on both men. Cameras were live when Al Pacino saw the note on Jimmy's desk, asked to read it, and what he read completely broke him. Jimmy hesitated. His hand moved toward the note protectively. Al, I don't think it's personal. It's not for the show. But Al Pacino had that look in his eyes. That actor's instinct that something real was happening. Something that mattered more than the scripted flow of a talk show interview. Please, Al said simply. Jimmy looked at the note, then at Al, then made a decision that would define this moment. He picked up the small piece of paper and handed it across the desk. Al unfolded it carefully. His eyes scanned the handwriting. And his entire legendary composure shattered. His hands started trembling. His mouth opened slightly, like he was trying to breathe but couldn't quite manage it. One hand moved to his chest, pressing against his heart. His eyes, those eyes that had stared down movie cameras for 60 years, filled with tears. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, which he never did during interviews. Al? Are you okay? Al couldn't speak. He just stared at the note, reading it again, his shoulders beginning to shake. Jimmy stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. The control room erupted into chaos. Director Dave Diamadi was on the headset. What's happening? Did we get a medical emergency? Jimmy, can you hear me? Producer Mike DiCenzo stood beside him, watching the monitors. Don't cut. Keep rolling. Something's happening. On stage, Jimmy had moved around his desk and was kneeling beside Al's chair. The audience could see his face now, no longer the TV host, just a human being deeply concerned about another human being. Al, talk to me. What is it? Al held up the note with shaking hands. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. Where did you get this? It was delivered to the studio an hour ago. I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't going to mention it on air, I hadn't had time to put it away. Who wrote this? Jimmy took a breath. Your daughter. Olivia. The audience gasped. Some of them knew. Al Pacino had 4 children, and his relationship with his oldest daughter had been complicated, strained for years by the pressures of fame and the impossible demands of his career. Al pressed the note to his chest, his eyes closing. Tears ran down his face, the face that had been Michael Corleone, Tony Montana, Frank Serpico. All those characters known for their toughness, their power. And here was the man behind them, completely undone by words written by his daughter. Jimmy, Al said, his voice breaking. She says she forgives me. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what was written in that note. And to understand that, you need to understand the relationship between Al Pacino and his oldest daughter, Olivia. Olivia Pacino was born in 1989 to Al and his then-girlfriend, actress Jan Tarrant. Al was 49 years old, at the height of his powers, one of the most sought-after actors in the world. His schedule was brutal: filming, press tours, award shows, script readings. The demands of being Al Pacino left little room for the demands of being a father. He tried. He really did. But trying and succeeding are different things. Olivia grew up seeing her father in magazines and on movie screens more often than she saw him in person. Birthday parties he missed because of filming schedules. School plays he couldn't attend because of premieres. Graduations that conflicted with award shows. Al would call when he could. Send gifts. Make promises to visit that sometimes he kept and sometimes he didn't. He loved his daughter. He never doubted that. But love and presence are different things, and Olivia grew up understanding that her father's first love was his craft. By the time Olivia was in her 20s, the distance between them had become a canyon. Conversations were stilted, awkward. Visits were rare. She'd stopped expecting him to show up, stopped being disappointed when he didn't. It was easier that way. 3 years ago, Al had tried to bridge that gap. He'd called her on her birthday, actually remembered it without his assistant reminding him, and had said, "I want to do better. I want to be in your life." "You've said that before, Dad," Olivia had replied, her voice tired. Not angry. Just tired. "I know. But I mean it this time." "Okay," she'd said, not believing him. And then Al had gone to London for 6 months to film a project, and had barely called. When he came back, he'd sent flowers with a card that said, "Sorry. I'm working on it." Olivia had thrown the flowers away. That was 2 years ago. They hadn't spoken since. Until tonight. Until that note. The note had been delivered to The Tonight Show's studio at 9 p.m., 1 hour before taping. A production assistant had brought it to the producer's office. "This just came by courier. Marked urgent for Jimmy Fallon, personal." Jimmy had opened it during the final pre-show meeting. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the signature made his chest tighten. Olivia Pacino. The note was short. "Mr. Fallon, my father is your guest tonight. We haven't spoken in 2 years. I've been angry for most of my life about the father he wasn't. But I'm getting married next month, and I've been thinking about whether to invite him. I've been thinking about forgiveness, and whether some absences are too big to forgive. I watched your show last week. The one where you talked about your father passing away. You said something that stuck with me. You said, we waste so much time being angry about who people aren't instead of appreciating who they are. I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to let go of the father I wanted and accept the father I have. So I'm writing to tell him something I should have said a long time ago. I forgive him. For the missed birthdays. For the broken promises. For choosing his career over me 1,000 times. I forgive him because holding on to it is killing me, and I'm tired of being angry. I don't know if you'll see this in time. I don't know if you'll even read it on air. Please don't, it's too personal. But if my father is sitting across from you tonight, could you give this to him? Could you tell him I wrote it today, and I mean every word? Tell him I'm getting married on June 15th. Tell him I'd like him to be there if he can. But if he can't, I understand. And I forgive him for that too. Thank you, Olivia. Jimmy had read it twice, then folded it and put it in his pocket. He told the producers not to mention it. This wasn't material. This was real life, and it felt too sacred to turn into television. But he'd kept it. And during the commercial break before AL's segment, he'd taken it out of his pocket and placed it on his desk, not quite knowing why. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as a question about what to do with it. He'd never expected Al to notice it. He'd never expected this moment. Behind the scenes, Fallon made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Jimmy was still kneeling beside Al's chair. The legendary actor was clutching the note like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever held. The audience sat in absolute silence, many of them crying, all of them understanding they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment. Jimmy made a decision. He stood up, turned to face camera one, and spoke directly to the millions watching at home. Folks, something real is happening right now. This isn't part of the show. Al's daughter Olivia wrote him a letter, and she asked me to give it to him. I wasn't planning to do it on air, but well, here we are. He turned back to Al. Al, do you want to take a break? We can go to commercial, you can have some privacy. No, Al said, his voice hoarse but firm. He looked up at Jimmy with those tear-filled eyes. No, keep rolling. People need to see this. Fathers need to see this. He held up the note so the audience could see it, though not close enough for the cameras to read the words. My daughter wrote this. My Olivia. And she's forgiving me for being a terrible father. For missing her childhood. For choosing movies over her. His voice cracked completely. And I don't deserve it. I don't deserve her forgiveness. But she's giving it to me anyway. Jimmy pulled up a chair and sat beside Al, not across from him anymore. Equal. Present. What are you going to do? Jimmy asked quietly. Al looked at the note again, at his daughter's handwriting, at the words he'd been too afraid to hope for. She's getting married? June 15th. She wants me there. Are you going to go? Al Pacino, Michael Corleone, the man who'd played characters that never showed weakness, never admitted failure, looked directly into the camera and said the most important line of his career. I'm going to be there. And this time, I'm not going to miss it. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. The audience exploded. Not polite applause. Not TV applause. Real, thunderous, cathartic applause. People standing, crying, clapping for a father promising to show up and a daughter brave enough to forgive. But Jimmy wasn't done. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his cell phone. He looked at Al. Do you want to call her? Right now? Al's eyes widened. What? Call Olivia. Tell her you got the note. Tell her you'll be there. Don't wait. Don't let another day pass. Call her right now on the stage and tell her. The control room lost its mind. But Jimmy didn't care. He handed Al his phone. Al's hands shook as he dialed. The studio went silent. Every camera stayed on his face as the phone rang. Hello? A woman's voice, confused. Olivia? Al's voice broke. Baby, it's Dad. I got your note. Jimmy Fallon just gave it to me on his show and I read what you wrote. Silence on the other end. Then crying. I'm so sorry. Al continued, tears streaming down his face. For everything. For all of it. And I'm coming to your wedding. June 15th. I'll be there. I promise you. And this time, I'm keeping my promise. Dad? Olivia's voice was barely audible through her tears. I'm here, baby. I'm finally here. The studio erupted again. Jimmy stood back, tears running down his own face, letting father and daughter have this moment. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Al asked to keep the note. Jimmy insisted. Al had it framed with one addition, his daughter's wedding invitation, which arrived 2 weeks later. On June 15th, Al Pacino walked his daughter down the aisle. He gave a speech at the reception where he thanked Jimmy Fallon for giving him a second chance he didn't deserve. The note still sits on Al's desk. Next to it, a photo from the wedding. Father and daughter. Finally together.